For those of you who are younger than me, Rob Schneider was a comedian who was on Saturday Night Live, I think in the early 90s. I think so.
H.W. Bush era, I think.
Yes, and maybe just after that. With Sandler, I think he was on contemporaneously.
He was hired in 88 and then was there as a writer, but then went from 1990 to 1994. He was in the cast.
Lots of Republicans from that time.
Yeah.
Sandler, Schneider, Jim Brewer on SNL.
Dennis Miller.
James Downey is a little bit Republican leaning, if I remember correctly.
Just feels like more than now, but I don't know.
Well, in that era, it was Reagan. It was post Reagan, and there was a lot of us. I imagine that Schneider and I are of similar age. I don't know how old he is exactly, but and he was, he wasn't like geniusly funny, but he was funny.
He had big movies like from when I was a kid. I remember Deuce Bigelow and the El Gigolo. I remember Hot Chick. Like those were
the movie where he said, "You can do it."
Yeah,
that's
right.
like 6 Sandler movies.
His most famous thing was the copy guy, where Matt would come in, Matadingo, and it was the same joke over and over again, and it would just get to extreme. And then,
but if you're 8 and you're watching the PG-13 movie, one of your first, that was like Rob Schneider. He was for us.
But the reason why I say this is because on this interview, apparently, and I don't think we have a clip of it, he said, "I don't care about my career, what this means for my career." Is it on there? Okay, let's hear.
Are you willing to lose it all for what you believe?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have it, then we have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about my career anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I care about my children's,
Me too.
the country that they're going to live in. And my hope is this. My hope is a beautiful story.
Pause it. Now, let me just say this. How old is Schneider? Can you look it up?
He's 58.
He's
Okay.
3 years older
Yeah.
than you.
So he's 3 years older than me. I totally get I don't care about my career anymore. I totally get that. I totally get that. And I'm not sure what he's risking when he doesn't care about that. But, when you get to be our age, it's just like, I'm ready for retirement.
Yeah.
And that dude he's got some cash banked.
Yeah.
But he's worried about his children.
I'm not
And
worried.
he should be. But what is it that he's worried about? What is he worried about for his children? Is it climate change? Is it climate change? Like, what is he worried about with the children? Is it climate change? Because I'm worried about that. I'm worried about climate change. I'm worried about all the commensurate problems that come from that. Extreme weather, more possible pandemics. I am worried about the idea of maybe authoritarianism coming to this country in some fashion. We just did have an attempt to usurp an election and a president who took a lot of sensitive documents, and who knows what he was going to do with those or did with them for that matter. But let's listen in. He's going to tell us a long story about what he's concerned with.
Yeah, I'll be explained.
Are you willing to lose it all for what you believe?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have it, then we have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about my career anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I care about my children's,
Me too.
the country that they're going to live in. And my hope is this. My hope is a beautiful story from a chaplain in England. When the American flyers came over in the early days of World War II, when the American flyers came over this is like the dog days, 1942, late 42, when like their friends were getting blown out of the sky. They would go over on the bombers and half would come back, 2/3 would come back, but they were dying. And there was one particularly awful week, 2 weeks, where there was a very high percentage of these pilots were getting blown out of the sky and getting killed. And they went to the prison. They went to the Air Force chaplain, and the pilot said, "Why?" I said, "Our friends are dying. Why should we do this? Why should we get up tomorrow and fly?" They did this at like literally 4:45. They're supposed to leave 5:30. Why should we do this? Tell us why. They didn't say they weren't going to do it. So tell us why we should do this. Our friends are dying. Tell us. And the chaplain was really, woke up and said, well, humanity has come out of has come out of the dark ages. We've come out of where people get burned at the stake. People believe and go along with this. And there's a darkness that we have come out of and doing a more of an enlightened period, a more freer period. And he said, this is a step back into those darkness, into the darkest parts of humanity. And we need to stand up for that now. And that requires this. So they all flew.
We
Get
are
to the point.
there again.
Yeah. And it
Wait.
requi-
That was the point?
Yeah, that was the point.
That was the point?
That was
Yeah,
the
I
point.
know. Everybody's waiting for like him to do like a wait. Isn't there a joke that comes with this? Doesn't
I mean,
he,
the
like,
joke
do-
is that fucking hat he has on his head, but yeah.
Both
other
their
than
outfits
that-
are amazing.
I mean, this is like this is when conservatives dress up. They're all into this newsboy cap thing. I don't
Schneider,
really get it, but
Schneider looking like a chimney sweep. Glenn Beck wearing a huge cap, huge hat.
But the best is like Beck. You could tell you had to take a moment, like, oh, we're there now.
so
We are. Let's just be clear.
yeah.
We are at the precipice. There's two things that are happening here,
Mhm.
right? There's those people who are willing to go out and risk not returning because only 2/3, like 1/3 or 1/2 of their friends are getting shot down as they fly their sorties over
Right.
here. That's one part of it, and that is presumably
Him.
him.
Yeah.
And Glenn.
Yeah.
He and Glenn are the ones who may not come back,
It's
or
yeah.
just may not get another crack at doing like a teen comedy.
all of our guys were doing live streams and half of them were getting content
Ah,
strikes.
exactly.
no more Grown Ups 3 for me.
This is the Crowder. This is the Crowder World War II.
This
thing
is right.
also.
Exactly.
This is really it.
But then the other thing is the oncoming reemergence of going back into the dark ages, where he said, which he described as people were being burned at the stake. Let's remember who it was that were being burned at the stake.
Yeah, who's the people?
The people who were being burned at the stake were women who weren't necessarily towing the patriarchal line at the time and were considered witches.
Problems, yep.
Were men who weren't necessarily presenting as the dominant form of masculinity at that time as perceived by everyone, were slaves. But who does he think it is? Let's play it just a little bit more. Maybe we get a little more clarity as to who he thinks they're coming for.
Go along with this. And there's a darkness that we have come out of and doing a more of an enlightened period, a more freer period. And he said, this is a step back into those darkness, into the darkest parts of humanity. And we need to stand up for that now.
Stand against it, I think he means.
And that requires this. So they all flew.
We are there again.
Yeah, and it requires a new set of flyers.
So
Oh
they're
my
the
God.
Flyers, and they're in his story. The Flyers are fighting against fascism, where any deviation from the norm was perceived to be a threat to society and stability. Any deviation from what the behaviors or the in-group was met with genuine persecution. But to be a conservative is to be constantly feeling like you are being persecuted because you no longer have, or there is some type of threat to the position you have maintained in the hierarchy until that point.
Yeah.
And so they feel under threat when they lose their slaves. They feel under threat when they lose their political hegemony. They feel under threat when other people have more, the right to vote gets expanded and their political hegemony gets diminished, right? I mean, if you allow women to vote and I'm a white guy, you're cutting into my political power. If you pass the Civil Rights Act, you pass the Voting Rights Act, you're cutting into my political power. If you say that I can no longer, or that society is going to frown upon me for objectifying women, then my social power diminishes. That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Wait, is there more? No, there's no more. Is there more? Oh, let's see a little bit more. What are they all? They get super emotional over this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, getting your getting your scene cut from a David Spade movie is kind of like getting your plane shot out of the skies by
A little bit.
the Nazi Air Force.
Oh, is that what happened to him?
What?
Did he get his scene cut?
Oh, and I don't know. He hasn't
I think
been
there was actually something like that.
he hasn't been in Sandler movies for a while.
Not good for business. Adam Sandler knows that stuff.
Oh, 1 second.
We got more?
There again.
Yeah, and it requires a new set of flyers.
Why did that affect you so much?
Well,
I'm afraid
I
of
do feel
flying.
the sacrifice that's required. You know, like we have to make it,
What the fucking
and we got to do it
sacrifice is this dude talking about?
because we were lucky, man. We grew up in that boom time
Yeah.
of American, like 1947, Jackie Robinson. You know, I consider that like, you know, that when the inclusive part of America, and then 54, you know.
Yeah,
What?
I would say.
Yeah, pause it for a sec. 1954 was the inclusive part of America?
Well,
And then
so
he
listen,
says Jackie
when we-
Robinson in
when
the
we
same
let-
breath?
When we let a black person play baseball.
And
Where
what
it was-
happened to him
where-
when that was happening, by the way? Any Wikipedia scrolls that
The
Rob
audience
Schneider
like
wants
that?
to
It was just
undergo?
like when we allowed a black person into the baseball thing, and yeah, maybe there was a couple of people who were a little bit critical, but when we had control of our own destiny and we just decided to let a black person in, that is when we were in the heyday of inclusivity.
And Jim Crow still had like almost a decade left.
I know. I was about to say, like, in 1954, you know, right before all those black people stopped, right before they started making such hay out of all those water cannons and dogs, right?
Oh, let's continue. This is fascinating.
You know, I consider that like, you know, that when the inclusive part of America, and then 54, you know, Brown versus Board of Education. And then you have like my dad, 1954. He just, after Brown versus Education, he said, I'm gonna, and my dad was in real estate, son, I'm gonna rent to black people. And he said, this is wrong. This is not moral. And I grew up with that guy, you know, and I grew up with like, you know, my mother was an educator, and, you know, when also half her family were killed during the Japanese occupation. So I grew up with that. So I was very aware of like,
Yeah.
and so that morally shaped me. And so it does make me think like we were so lucky the 70s. Come on.
I know.
How great was
I
that?
know.
We got to
I've
live free.
thought of
Pause
this.
it
I've thought of
again.
it.
We. Like, it amazes me how conservatives are unable to honestly differentiate between their own personal experience. Like, Schneider here is crying about the loss of his childhood. I'll do my chair psychology here. And he has no ability to distinguish that from like larger societal trends.
I mean, this is, if he's 58, folks, I was 13 in 1980. So he was 16 in 1980. The 70s, he was literally in grade school and junior high. and living, some type of free. I mean, yeah, send me back to my childhood too. If I could redo it, if I could be a little bit less chubby and maybe a little bit less obnoxious, I'll go back. I'll get it right this time. But that's not the same as what's going on in society at that time.
I mean, the thing about my dad decided, I'm going to rent to black people. Like, I hope he did. A lot of people didn't, made the opposite choice and just continued renting to white people, like to the point where it caused.
But that's not society, right? Just my father's personal decision was society. And I
Supposedly.
mourn for the loss of that.
But it's also weird too, because he's centering, like, it's not, he's saying, like, I grew up with this morality. This is the morality I learned, that we should rent to black people. But it is, it doesn't seem to be an awareness of the problem. It only is an awareness of he and his dad, and then he as being the solution.
And the 70s, right? That was so great, when all the people that were dying in Vietnam, we should go back there.
Well, it's the early 70s. To be fair, he was only 9 at that point.
Ah.
He got a little wiser when he was 16.
The 70s. Come on.
I know.
How great was that?
I know.
We get to live free.
I've thought of this. I've thought about
Get to
this
live
a lot.
free.
We're same age. And I think about it a lot, that my kids won't have the opportunity to see America at the height and at our best, even though we had all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
But we still had freedom in a different way than they'll ever
yeah.
understand. And, when I left New York, I didn't realize it until later. I think, I was at the top and you were close to, at the very top, close to the end of that era of New York.
Pause
You know what I mean?
Pause it. Now, I just want to be clear on what they're talking about. What is the freedom that they had in the 70s that they don't have today? He was a shock jock. He was a shock jock getting blitzed. And I can assure you that his shock jockiness, I can right now, without having any of it in front of me, tell you exactly who were the butts of his jokes and his attacks and his pranks. That's the freedom that they've lost. And it's not even like they're perfectly free to do it. They can say what they want all the time, but what they've lost is not freedom. They have lost the ability two things. They have lost the ability to deploy picking on and attacking those who are marginalized as a way of building fame and celebrity and approval from society at large. And they've also lost the ability to monetize it in the same fashion. That's what they're lost. That's what their freedom is. I want the ability to attack whoever I want and be appreciated for it, because they can still attack whoever they want. And I also want to make money off of it. And now the freedom's gone. That's what he's talking about. This is Jerry Seinfeld whining that nobody likes my gay king joke anymore. I go to colleges and I talk about the gay king and people just boo and hiss. It's because our society is unfree. That's what they're talking about. They just don't like the fact that taste has left them behind. This is just the olds crying about it. That's all it is. It's just the olds. They're just old, is what they are.
Old men yelling at clouds.
Red their eyes are, though. They're so sad.
Yeah. Old men like Schneider wishing for his childhood, and old men like Glenn Beck wishing for the time when he was still able to pop Percocet
Yeah.
and do whatever the hell he wanted.
I mean, look, we all lament the passing of our youth.
But we don't make it our politics.
Some do.
Or at
Some
least
do.
maybe, yeah.
But understand that's what you're hearing here. Their lamentations are just they're upset that they're old. Everybody gets their little, not everybody, but they have their, and there's probably nothing worse than having felt the sun upon your face. And then all of a sudden the sun goes out.
Yeah, you're in a strip mall with Glenn Beck.
Near in a strip mall with Glenn Beck.
To basically doing an on-camera therapy session with each other.
Right. Trying to get some of that acclaim back. He'll go back on tour with Jim Brewer.